Hello, and welcome to In the Roud. Greetings and salutations, dear listeners. My name is Matt Quinn, and this is In the Roud, a folk song podcast. I'll be your host to guide you through the world of traditional folk song as we go through the Roud Index, one song at a time. Each episode will feature two guests, one providing an historical look at the song, while the other will be a singer from the folk music scene to talk about their own version of the song. Way back at the very beginning of this podcast, I recorded an interview with Steve Roud where he explained a little bit about the Roud Index, so please head back to that introduction episode if you are unsure what the Roud Index is. Well, it's now October 2024. How did we get here already? I hope you've all had a great summer. I had a marvellous time performing at some folk festivals in August, and I also got COVID and spent a week locked down at home. Fun times. Let's get started then on Season 2 of In the Roud. Over the next 10 weeks, we'll be looking at the next 10 songs in the Roud Index, which are number 11, The Baffled Knight, number 12, The Elfin Knight, number 13, The Dowie Dens of Yarrow, number 14, The Demon Lover, number 15, The Cruel Ship's Carpenter, number 16, The Frog and the Mouse, number 17, The Three Butchers, number 18, Bruton Town, number 19, The Nobleman and the Thresherman, and number 20, The False Knight on the Road. A very interesting selection of songs there, and I can't wait to get stuck into the history of them alongside hearing from some singers about them too. So let's get going. This week's song is Roud 11, which is the song The Baffled Knight. Just a quick content warning before we begin. Due to the subject matter of this song, the topic of sexual assault is mentioned and discussed during the course of the interviews. Later on, we will hear from In the Roud regular singer and researcher Vic Gammon, but for now, let's take a look at the song's history with the creator of the Roud Index himself, Steve Roud. Well, hello, Steve Roud.
Hello again.
Hello. How lovely to have you back to kick off Season 2. I can't quite believe we're already here at Season 2. And yeah, with another 10 songs. Roud's 11 to 20. And, okay, well, Roud 11, what have we got? What have you got for us, Steve?
Yeah, Roud 11 is Child 112.
Ah, so another child ballad. Quite a few of them
Another
popping
child
up.
ballad. A lot of them come up at in my early numbers. This one, we're calling it The Baffled Knight, because that's what Child calls it, but a lot of people will know it as Blow Ye Winds by I-Ho or Under the New Mown Hay. We'll talk about the titles in a minute.
That's right. A lot of people on the sort of revival folk scene, as it were, will know this from a version by Faustus called Blow the Windy Morning. And their source for it, we will mention later on. I've already clocked that.
We always have this problem with titles, especially with the older ones. Because sometimes, as in this case, the blow the windy bit comes in quite late, a good 200 years after the song was first reported. So if you're talking about the history of it, it's confusing to use a sort of modern, when I say modern, only 150 years later, a modern element in the song that wasn't really there at the beginning. So Child, in this case, calls it The Baffled Knight. That pretty much sums it up. It is about a knight who is baffled. Sometimes Child's titles are a bit off, and we don't like using them because they are a bit too obscure. But in this kind of case, it's good to. I like to stick to the older title.
Right. Okay. Great. So in terms of the plot of the song? What is it about?
Right. Well, it's one of those that it's been around for a good, 300-400 years. So it's one of those where the basic element of the plot has stayed the same, but lots of details around that central core have changed. And in some respects, although the meaning stays the same, the sort of nuance of it changes quite a lot over time. We'll come on to that in a minute. The basic story is that there's this chap, originally a knight, later versions have him as a shepherd's son, which already changes the whole, the class thing, whether he's a knight or a shepherd.
That's certainly a bit of a downgrade in terms of jobs as well.
Well, exactly. But we'll stick to the knight at the moment. So he, because calling it the Baffled Knight. So the knight is wandering across the countryside. It is rural setting. This sort of thing really wouldn't work in a town setting. And he meets a girl, a lass, a maid, whatever. Now, in some versions, she's actually swimming in the river. In other cases, she's a shepherd's daughter, so she's out there looking after the sheep. In some cases, she's just wandering across the moor or the hill, as one does. So he approaches her and tries it on. Now, again, here is the question of the nuance, is as to whether he says he's going to rape her or whether he tries to seduce her or just chats her up. Basically, the wordings of the different versions, you can read them in all sorts of ways. But in the earliest versions, there's no messing about. He just says, "I shall have my will of you," and she says, "So this is the core of the story." She then says, either if she's been swimming, she says, "Well, let me get dressed, leave my clothes alone." If she hadn't been swimming, she's just wandering around in the countryside. She says, he says he'll have his will. She says, "Yeah, well, that's all very well, but you'll rumple my best gown. And it wouldn't be very comfortable out here on the windy moor. So take me to my father's house, or take me home, and we'll do it there in comfort. And not only that, but I'll give you some money as well." So, who can resist such an offer?
Well, yeah.
So
we are going to come. Yeah, so we're coming on to some. Yeah, I imagine that
come back to that
over the course of this podcast, we're going to come up with some oddly sort of questionable behaviour from.
Exactly. We'll come back to that in a minute. So he then says, "Fair enough." Puts virtually all certainly the earlier versions, he puts it on his steed because he's a knight after all. Doesn't work so well when he's a shepherd's son, but puts on his horse, and sometimes he has a spare horse with him, and they ride.
How fortuitous!
Exactly. Well, just in case. They ride back to the father's house. She jumps off the horse, runs indoors, or runs in and shuts the gate, and says, "Aha, I'm a maid within, and you're a fool without." In other words, I was tricking you, and I'm all right now. Hence the baffled knight. His plans, his machinations have been thwarted.
A very early form of wordplay in
yeah,
English folk song.
And she usually taunts him with being a fool, for not carrying through his original plan, which again is a little bit iffy, because if he was just planning to rape her, then she shouldn't be saying this. But she often taunts him with half a verse or sometimes a verse saying, things like, if you will not when you may, you shall not when you will. Or, as in the version I think that Vic is going to sing for you, she taunts him with the fact that there is a cockerel in my father's garden who doesn't tread the hens. In other words, she blames him for not following through properly. And so he is a fool. He's a figure of fun. So that's the basic story. But as I say, the details change a fair amount, and the nuance, as I say, of this whole encounter um, changes and can be interpreted in a variety of ways. But the central joke that he fancies her, she says later on, and then tricks him. I mean, that's the core of the story. That's virtually always there. It's that trick. She is clever and he's a fool.
Indeed.
And if you look at the titles, that it's gone by lots of different titles. It's interesting that the earlier ones focus on him. So yonder comes a courteous knight, or the over courteous knight. Right, so he's the main character in that title, whereas some of the later ones focus on her, the politic maid, the lady's policy. In other words, they're focusing on her trick rather than his bafflement, as it were. And then the more recent versions from, I would guess, I don't know for sure, but from the early 19th century, focus on the milieu, that where it's all happening under the new mown hay is often what it's called, because that's where he says he'll first lay her down in the new mown hay. And the Blow Ye Winds title comes in from a chorus, which, as I say, I think is first half of the 19th century. Can't see it earlier. There always was a chorus. Always was a jolly gay tune, as Bronson calls it. There was a chorus, derry, derry down, or that sort of thing. But the Blow Ye Winds bit, which really has nothing to do with the song whatsoever, comes in with a vengeance in early 19th century and could well be a broadside writer's edition. But from then on, it's very often called Blow Ye Winds or Blow Ye Winds Hi Ho or whatever.
Oh yeah. So how popular was this then? Was it?
Well, it was well collected. Certainly in England, dozens of versions collected in England by the early collectors, and into the post-war period when people went around with their tape recorders. So dozens and dozens of versions from England and Scotland, popular in Scotland. Not so many from Ireland. There are some, but not so many, and not so many, odd enough, from the USA. Again, it was known, but it wasn't one of those, really common child ballads. Quite a few from Canada, though. And it was printed on broadsides right from the middle of the 17th century, the 1600s, right up into the 19th century. There are versions still being printed in the 1880s, 1890s. So it's still a popular song.
Wow.
And right at the beginning, soon after the first printing, it was popular enough that there were several sequels that, he would meet her again and she would trick him in another way. She'd make him take his boots off or something, or climb a tree, or in other words, a different trick each time, but still the same thing. The same chap, the same knight did not learn his lesson.
Not learn his lesson. I thought I read somewhere that there was some of the earlier versions that went on a bit, the much longer songs, because the maid keeps tricking him over and over again.
Yeah, because in the original, the first version we've got, it's just the one trick. But the early broadsides, because they tended to be longer songs, they were bigger broadsides. They had more room to fill. They sometimes fitted the sequel in straight after the main song.
That makes sense.
Therefore, you could have the different tricks, but these were standalone sequels, as well as continuations.
So what's the date on the for an earliest known printed version?
Right, the first known printed version. It's not a broadside. It's a book called I can never say this properly. Deuteromelia, 1609, right? 1609, a very early date for, for our historical purposes. We often can't get back that far.
No, I think the earliest we've gone back so far, I think, is that potential but probably not true mention of that woman having written the Seeds of Love.
Oh, yes, that's right. This is well before that.
Or maybe that was like 1690s, wasn't it? I think
Yeah,
that was
because
something like
the main broadside printings for most of our songs come in the second half of the 17th century.
or maybe I'm thinking of the Three Ravens, I think.
Ah, right. I was mentioning that in a moment. Yeah,
Okay, all right, okay, right, I'm jumping ahead.
yeah. So Deuteromelia, okay, is by Thomas Ravenscroft, right?
There
1609.
we go.
Now, he was a musician, uh, as far as we know, a poet, a bit of a playwright, but we don't know a lot about him. He wrote 3 books at that time. Deuteromelia actually means the second book, as
Ah,
in Deuteronomy, presumably. He wrote one called Pamela with 2 M's, or no, Pamelia, Deuteromelia, and Melismata, right, all 1609, 1611. And between them, they have early versions, sometimes the earliest version of Three Blind Mice, the Three Ravens, as you just mentioned, is in there. Martin said to his man, Fie, man, fie, that's in there. Of all the birds that ever you see, the owl song, and also a frog went a courting.
which we'll come back to in about 4 or 5
Yeah,
episodes
that's
time.
right, round 16. Now, with the frog, we know that that was around beforehand. We know that that goes back at least 50 years before this. So, whether or not Ravenscroft wrote these songs, like this Baffled Night one, we don't know. Um, my instinct is that he didn't write this, that it was already a song because it's already a little bit muddled in the middle of it. Um, so we know it's around in 1609 with that central core story. Um, I think that it was a bit earlier than that, but at the moment we can't prove it. And the same with, if it's the first printing, we very rarely know. You don't know whether they wrote it or not. But anyway, Ravenscroft's Deuteromelia, 1609, is the first mention that we've got. And from then on, as I say, it was regularly printed by broadside and chapbook printers. The, all the well-known 17th century printers printed some version. And by the 19th century, as I say, it's still regularly available from people like John Pitts and Jemmy Patnack right up to the 1880s. So it's been popular, as I say, and literally in print virtually all that time since 1609. So we can go back to the blowy winds bit. As I said, that seems to come in around the early part of the 19th century. John Pitts, who is printing from 1799 to the 1830s, he calls it blow ye winds, I think.
Right, so this is sort of 200, almost 200 years later.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. Now, that chorus may have popped in before that. I haven't looked at every single version from the 18th century, but it comes in sort of with a vengeance, if you like, in the early 19th century. So it looks very much as if a broadside writer has added that chorus just to make it go with the swing.
And to extend it, probably make it
Yeah,
make it longer, fit on the page.
Up its page. Yes, that's right. Yeah. But then, as I said earlier on, we can get back to the analysis of the core of it all. The actual scene where he meets her. He comes across her, and what is said between them is obviously designed to be banter. You know, she isn't a shy retiring girl saying, you know, leave me alone. She gives as good as she gets, as it were, verbally. But especially some of the earlier versions do make you feel a bit uncomfortable. But a lot of these songs do. The central theme of, sexual relationships between the main two characters, and boy meets girl kind of thing is always open to question. Because the songs don't, but a book would spell out exactly what they said and what happened, where the songs often don't. They take things for granted or bits have been left out. So you don't know, even with a song like The Trois Magicians, where turns himself into various things, he turns himself into an animal and she turns herself into something, and he then, they go through these transformations so that he can pursue her. Nowadays, that makes us uncomfortable because it feels like a rape. It feels like,
it's very much sort of sexual predator.
A predator,
sort of thing.
exactly. That's the
Yeah,
word I was looking for. But it can be read that it's a sex game, that she is a willing participant, and they play this role-playing game, and then they go to bed. Now, it depends on how you want to look at it, because we haven't got the information. We haven't got the full story. We don't know everything that was said in a song. You usually don't. So it can be interpreted either way.
Yeah, there are some versions of that where she very definitely is saying, "You will never never have my maidenhead."
Well, yeah, but all the riddle songs are the same. Yes, we'll get together if you can, find plow me an acre of land, and a chicken without a bone, and all of those things. Is she saying that to put him off, or is she saying that to be part of the game? Now, what I'm saying is, well, I mean, it's not going to be popular with some people. They're going to say these are definitely male-centered songs of pursuit and, in effect, rape. Some of them clearly are, and some versions are, but some versions are not. Excuse me. Now, Vic's going to sing you a version. I don't know which one he's going to sing, but I should think that most modern people sing versions that play down that worrying bit. It is the banter that matters, and she is in control in effect. But I think we'll leave it at that. Have a look at some of the older versions. Looking Child, he's got 5 different versions, if I remember rightly, from the 17th and 18th century.
Right.
But
yeah, that's a whole topic which could very well, be the subject of an episode at some point.
yeah, certainly.
That subject matter in folk songs. That's
yeah,
it's something that needs to, if it hasn't already, it needs to be discussed.
yeah.
And
But one of the problems with a discussion like that is that if you look at one particular version, then you get one particular message from it. Whereas if you look at all of the versions, then you can get another perspective on it.
yes, of course.
But individually, the individual singer just has that one version. They don't know the history of the song.
And they might only be singing that exact version because that's the way their grandfather sang it.
Yeah, exactly.
And they're singing it because their grandfather sang it, not because they necessarily agree with the politics of it or something.
Right.
There's all sorts of factors going into this.
Exactly. But in the cold light of day, if we read it with 21st century eyes, there often is problems. We live in a male-centered society. We always have. So the songs are mostly from a male point of view.
Yes, probably written by men, and
Yeah,
from that point of view,
almost certainly written by men. So you pay your money and you take your choice, basically.
So where does when does the knight become a shepherd in the chronology?
I can't remember.
Okay.
It, fairly soon after. Well, not in the 17th century, I think, but
Is it before or after the Below the Windy Morning sort of
before. Yes,
before that?
Yeah.
So are there versions where it's a shepherd but there's no Below the Windy Morning chorus
Yes,
then?
yes,
Okay.
yeah. They don't go together, as it were. That they are separate
Okay.
things in the history, as far as I remember. Um, there's 219 versions in my index. So if you
Wow.
really want to go for it, you can,
And that's one of the more
219.
palatable numbers, isn't it? That's one of the more palatable numbers of entries.
Well, that's right.
When we get to Barbara Allen in a few
Oh yeah,
seasons' time, we'll get a whole different story there.
don't even think about it. Yeah.
219
Yeah.
then.
One more thing to talk about that I should have mentioned with the Thomas Ravenscroft books. They are fascinating because they've got these early versions. But they're also problematic in that they are most of the songs in there are written as catches or canons or rounds. In other words, they are written for, in this case, four voices. So they call it a freeman's song for four voices. Now, freeman is actually a misnomer for three-man songs, so that they were songs written for three people to sing, three mans. Then that got changed into freemans. So you get freeman songs for four voices. So there is a bass and a treble and two others. In other words, they're not what you would necessarily hear in a pub if they were singing in the pub, or at home, um, or at work. They are arranged.
So these would have been sort of performance pieces rather
Well,
than.
we don't know because
Oh,
it's
okay.
the
Yeah.
early time. Later on, there were what were called glee and catch clubs, which were definitely a middle class um, sort of leisure pursuit. So they would get together and sing glees, which were specifically written to be sung by two or three people, like a round. You know what a round is,
Yeah. Yeah.
where I sing the first line, then I sing the second line while you're singing the first line. That's all arranged. It doesn't really work unless you know the roles and you know how they fit together. Um, Now, all the songs in Ravenscroft books are like that. So we don't know how close that is to the folk, the ordinary people. In 1609, was there any difference between the middle class and the folk anyway?
Right.
So there's a bit of a discussion there as to how traditional this was at that time. You know, for four voices to sing, in different registers or whatever the word is very different to just open your mouth and everybody join in the chorus.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yes. So are we not? So I guess we're just not sure then of, I guess of the purpose of those books. Why the books, they're sort of what were they used for? Was it a record of things that were sung, or was it
Or was it,
I don't know.
were they old songs being reconfigured, or are they new songs being written? When we know
Yeah.
that Ravenscroft, he also wrote about the theory of music. So he was a literate musical person, wasn't just somebody who could knock out a tune. And the books do actually have the tunes written out in them, which is unusual for that period.
Wow.
Well,
Yeah.
so we
Yeah.
have the what might be the original tune, 1609 tune, but I can't read it because I don't read music. But um, the point being that we're with his early stuff, because we don't know the purpose, we don't know who it was written for, clearly it's written for literate, musically literate people, people who can read the music. So therefore, we don't know how close it was to what the Harry Coxes or the Emily Bishops of the time would be singing. I think that pretty much covers it. If you're looking for tunes, Bronson book on the tunes of the child ballads.
Oh yes, Bronson did compile like 4 or 5 volumes, didn't he,
Yeah,
of
that's right.
the tunes for the child
Yeah.
ballads.
Now he has. I mean, Child has 6 versions of the text in his main books. Bronson has 25 tunes.
Wow.
So the ones from Cecil Sharp as well, and some American ones as well. So if you're interested in the tunes, you should all have Bronson on your shelf, because he's the one who does the tunes basically. And Bronson also has some offshoot songs which are sort of the same story in an appendix. But
Right. Okay, great. So I think we're moving into our recommendations section. I still haven't recorded a recommendations jingle. I may get around to it. I may not. If I could be bothered and have the time, I'll have a go at something. But who would you recommend in terms of recordings of traditional singers doing this song?
there's quite a few post-war, post-Second World War recordings. One of the best known, because I think we put it in our Penguin book, was by Emily Bishop from Gloucestershire. A very much underrated singer. Unfortunately, we haven't got many recordings of Emily singing, but it's one of my favourites. So Emily Bishop. Sam Larner sang a very well-known song, sang it well as he sang everything well. Those are the 2 that I think are best known.
Yes, and certainly the Emily Bishop version is the one that the band Faustus then did.
Yeah.
On their album Broken Down Gentleman,
right.
Which is thoroughly brilliant.
There are several others. William Roud, R-E-W, from Devon, and Charlie Showers from Somerset also did versions.
Right.
And I think you were mentioning an Irish version by John Campbell.
John Campbell, that's right, collected by Tom Mullany in the early 1980s, I think it was.
I think
it was a rather nice version of that, I thought.
County Meath, I think he was from.
Yes, and that version's called There Was a Shepherd's Boy.
Yeah.
Whereas Emily Bishop's is Blow the Windy Morning, Sam Larner's is Clear Away the Morning Dew, I think it was labelled as in the end. It's an interesting thing that I'm coming up against now with titles of songs and labelling songs. And I think it was something that came up in your book, Folk Song in England, was that just because a song is labelled with a particular name in a book or on a CD of recorded singers doesn't necessarily mean that's what the singer knew the song as. And I came up against this when we were looking at episode 3 of last season, The Seeds of Love, because you provided me with that excellent recording of Gene Hopkins singing Sprig of Time. And then since then, I tracked down the original EP that's on. There's a little 4-track EP called 4 Sussex Singers, and she's on that, and that's where that recording comes from. And on the sleeve notes at the back of that, it mentions that she knew the song as being called You Lads and Lasses, but we've labelled it for the purposes of this EP as Sprig of Time because that's what we'll all know the song as being. As being Sprig of Time or Seeds of Love. So we've given it a more recognisable title so that you know what the song is, rather than Gene Hopkins knew it as You Lads and Lasses. And so there's the whole thing about just because a song is labelled as such, say Sam Larner, the release that the Sam Larner recording is on the Musical Traditions label CD called Cruising Round Yarmouth, and it's labelled as Clear Away the Morning Dew, but that might not necessarily be what he called it. It all depends on the person who collected it, I guess.
Indeed, it does. Well, no, there's a whole chain of things there. It's when the collector, the singer is singing, and the collector writes it down, and The collector often thinks, oh, this is a version of Foggy Dew. So she notes down Foggy Dew to remind themselves what the song is, not necessarily what the sing. But then when they write up their notes, they may translate it into something else. And then when somebody publishes it, and then somebody else comes along and says, oh, that's a version of so-and-so. So you've got a whole chain of changed titles.
Whole chain of unreliable narrators, yeah.
Which is why you use the Roud number.
Indeed.
Now, I mean, one thing to know, of course, is that a lot of singers, Harry Cox, for instance, often just knew his songs by the first line. That's what they used as their title. Now, that's not completely true, not across the board, because things like Farmer's Boy, as far as I know, everybody called it the Farmer's Boy, but some might have called it To Reap and Sow, but mostly it's known as, and Barbara Allen is almost always known as Barbara Allen.
Yes, I'm not sure that with the Farmer's Boy how helpful it would be to know the song as the first line, which is the sun had set behind yon hill.
Exactly.
I mean, that could be any song almost,
yeah.
Whereas the Farmer's Boy is specific.
But it is a minefield. There are some people, Steve Garden, for instance, has compiled a list of standard titles for us to use. To be honest, those work for a lot of songs, but other songs they don't. The Girl I Left Behind Me, there's just too many songs. You can't have The Girl I Left Behind Me, number 1, The Girl I Left Behind Me, number 2. And Pretty Polly, you might as well give up, because every song can be called Pretty Polly. Anyway, the point is that titles are slippery. We just have to live with it.
Exactly. So, yeah, I know that, so things like, and sometimes it's just one word difference. So, yeah, Emily Bishop's one for this song was Blow the Windy Morning. Sam Lana's one is labelled as Clear Away the Morning Dew. And then you got, I was going to mention Alfred Edgell. The recording of him singing this is on the CD called A Century of Song, a celebration of traditional singers. I can't remember what label that came out on.
That's an FDS publication, isn't it?
Oh, it's an EFDSS publication. That's right. That's a very, very excellent CD of recordings.
Edgell was one of the.
It's a very old recording. It's very.
He was one of Sharp's. Don't quote me on this. I might be wrong, but it wasn't one of Sharp's singers.
I think so.
In which case, it's probably a phonograph
or a wax cylinder or something.
Wax cylinder that you won't be able to hear anything. But
you can certainly make out the tune and listen to it, and that's Martin Carthy and Dave Swarbrick recorded that, and it's definitely the same tune. They've managed to get the tune from it, and probably some of the words as well. But that one's called, the Alfred Edgell one was labelled as Among the New Mown Hay. So all these titles kind of interchangeable.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And then you got the John Campbell in Ireland was called There Was a Shepherd's Boy. And then Cyril Barber was in Suffolk, and that was released on a veteran release. That was called, or at least that was labelled as Hail the Dewy Morning. So all these titles are interchangeable, hence the Roud number.
Yeah, that's right. But you can analyse the titles and say, well, a lot of those that you've quoted are from the chorus. So that was the memorable thing, either for the editor, the collector, or the singer. Is it the first line that matters, or the chorus, or the main character, like
exactly.
Farmer's Boy or Barbara Allen?
So in the respect of this song, it's whether it's choruses like Among the New Mown Hay, Blow Away the Windy Morning, or its character, the Baffled Knight, There Was a Shepherd's Boy.
Exactly.
Although There Was a Shepherd's Boy is probably the first line of the song.
Yeah. Well.
And then the Baffled Knight is a character. So yeah, it's a fascinating and exhausting subsection of folk song research.
Tell me about it. It's the indexer's nightmare.
Of course. Yeah. So yeah, Emily Bishop, Sam Lana, Cyril Barber, William Roud, and I'll say Alfred Edgell and John Campbell. I'll put the links to as many of them as I can in the show notes on whichever podcast place you're listening to. So Yeah, I think we'll draw it to a close there.
Yeah. Number 11, done and dusted.
I'm reloading unlisted, and stay tuned for Vic Gammon as he talks about his version. I'm not very good with my radio voice yet. It's like stay tuned for Dr. Vic Gammon. Anyway, before we ramble on any further, yeah, thanks very much for that. And I believe we've got you back for a few more. I'm just bringing up the list.
Probably. There's no escape now.
No escape from you. You're in it. You're in it to win it. Oh, not for a few weeks. I think we'll have you back for number 17 and number 20, episode 7 and 10. So you got a few weeks off while I talk to other people.
Okay.
But anyway, for the time being, Steve Roud, thanks very much.
Thank you.
A huge thanks again to Steve Roud for providing us with the history of the Baffled Knight. We're now at the halfway point in the episode, so we'll just take a few minutes and listen to a few different versions of this song sung by traditional singers. So what you're going to hear now are snippets of Among the New Mown Hay from Arthur Edgell, Clear Away the Morning Dew from Sam Larner, There Was a Shepherd's Boy from John Campbell, Hail the Dewy Morning from Cyril Barber, and Blow the Windy Morning from Emily Bishop.
As I stood as one breaking man, was among the new morning. I there destroy a pretty fair maid among the new morning, among the new morning. I wanted her to lay her down among the new morning, but the answer she gave unto me was, young man, leave me alone, oh, young man, leave me alone, oh.
As I walked out one morning gay to see what I could shoot, I there spied a pretty fair maid come to-rippling by the road. So all hail the dewy morning, blow on the winds I-oh, clear away the morning dew, how sweet the winds do blow. We both jogged on together till we come to some logs of hay. She said, young man, there is a place where you and I can lay. So all hail the dewy morning, blow on the winds I-oh, clear away the morning dew, how sweet the winds do blow.
Oh, there was a shepherd's boy and he had sheep out on the hill. He went down to the river for to see the lassie swimming. Uggas, oh, mallam, mallam, oh, rock-a-misha while you lads, rock-a-misha while you lads, oh. It would be better for the girls for to sew their silks and slips than to be going down to the river trying to swim again the stream. Uggas, oh, mallam, mallam, oh, rock-a-misha while you lads, rock-a-misha while you lads, oh. Come on, young man, she said, unto the field of hay, and that'll be the bonny place where you and me will play. Uggas, oh, mallam, mallam, oh, rock-a-misha while you lads, rock-a-misha while you lads, oh.
I went out one May morning to see what I could shoot. I there espied a fair pretty maid a-rowing in a boat, singing, hail the dewy morning, blow on the winds I-oh, clear away the morning dew, how sweet the winds doth blow. We both strolled on together till we comes to some cocks of hay. I said, young lady, it's a very nice place for you and I to play, singing, hail the dewy morning, blow on the winds I-oh, clear away the morning dew, how sweet the winds do blow.
There was a shepherd and he kept sheep upon a hill, and he would go each May morning home for to drink his fill. So it's blow the windy morning. He looked high and he looked low, and he gave a downward look, and there he spied a pretty maid a-washing at the brook. So it's blow the windy morning, blow the winds, oh, clear away the morning dew, and sweet the wind shall blow.
And you can find the links to those tracks and the albums from which they came in the show notes. On to the second half, I spoke with singer, researcher and In the Roud regular Vic Gammon, and we chatted about his history with folk music and his version of the Baffled night called The Morning Dew. Well, hello Vic Gammon.
Hello, Matt.
Hello, how are you?
Well, apart from having had COVID recently and just about getting over it, not bad.
Right, yes, of course you were at, well, we were all at Whitby Folk Week, weren't we? And a lot of people got COVID from that.
That's right.
And I would have done had I not had COVID the week before. So I was about the only safe person at Whitby.
Unhealthy stuff, this folk music.
I know. I was the only sort of immune person at Whitby, I think, because I got it from Sidmouth, and in the week between Sidmouth and Whitby festivals, I was at home with COVID, and then I tested negative and went to Whitby, and then tumultuous summer. But you're all right now, though. That's
well, I'm getting better. I'm getting there.
Good. It was nice at Whitby Folk Week, wasn't it? It was.
Oh, I had a great time. Really enjoyable. Lots of interesting things. Lots of good music. So
yeah,
you know.
And I had the pleasure to be your MC for one gig as well.
That's right. It was lovely.
It's a very good gig indeed. I've enjoyed. That was me hosting the traditional night out gigs every night.
Yeah, that was fun.
Which wasn't meant to be every night because my dad's meant to do some, but Dad had COVID as well, so he didn't come to Whitby. So I MC'd every night. I was very tired by the end. Right, so we've been talking on this episode about Roud 11, the Baffled Night, and we'll come to some chat about that in a short while. But this is very exciting. We had you on in the last season for a couple of the historical halves, but you're here in this episode in your capacity as a singer primarily.
Yeah, fine.
It's very exciting. I was very glad you were up for doing this half as well. So to kick us off then, tell us a bit about yourself and your history with folk music and with folk singing and songs and everything. When did it start for you?
Well, it started very early, actually. I mean, it was ludicrous. It must have been about 1953. Because we moved in 1954, and I remember I lived in South London. I was born in 1946. We lived in a funny old terraced cottage in South London. They built these cottages. Well, they didn't build them. The tram workers built them themselves, and they were all different along this road, St Alphonsus Road in Clapham, just near Clapham Common. And so I remember my parents being in bed on a Sunday and me going downstairs and turning the radio on and listening to the radio program as I roved out. And I think that was my first thing. I mean, it must have been because we moved about 1954, so it must have been about 1953. And it just blew my mind. I mean, hearing these old voices sing these story songs, it just really entranced me and sort of stimulated me, and I never looked back really. That was the first thing I remember. Then in the later, when I'd moved to Earlsfield in South London in the later 1950s, hearing Alan Lomax's programs, he'd done that Southern Journey, the one that Shirley Collins did with him. And the recordings there, some of the singers from the southern states were just fabulous, you know, and that just confirmed my interest in this stuff, you know. And I'd never looked back from there. I'd noticed, I was in the choir at school. I'd noticed some of the name Cecil Sharp cropped up against some of the arrangements of some of the songs we sang, so that set me off. But honestly, I was by the age of 10. I know I was interested, and
wow.
I bought my first record. I remember it was on my birthday, 27th of March. I don't want presents. 27th of March, 1956. I bought Lonnie Donegan's Rock Island Lion off the little local record shop that we had in Earlsfield. And then you looked at Donegan, you looked at his sources, you looked at Leadbelly and Woody Guthrie, but you also, I was interested. And by the age of 12, 13, I was going to folk clubs in the West End of London. I mean, quite what my parents actually thought of me going up to Soho every Saturday night. I mean, at the age of 30. Luckily, I was tall for my age, and I looked quite old, and I could pass for a 16, 17-year-old. I did at one time. I have a 17-year-old girlfriend, but that's another story.
Right,
When I was
okay.
about 14, but and I used to go to at the top in Soho Square, the top of the ACT building, which is a trade union building. There used to be the Ballads and Blues Club, and you'd have Ewan McCall, Peggy Seeger, Bert Lloyd, Seamus Ellis I saw there for the first time. Other singers that were around, Rambling Jack Elliott, he was a bit of a pain in the ass, but lots of really interesting stuff. Also, I went to school with a guy called Ken Blanchard, and his mum was Isabel Sutherland, a Scottish singer, a really rather good Scottish singer. And I got to know her quite early on. And in her house lived Enoch Kent. I think is still a very fine singer of Scots songs. So, interested in Scots music that way. So it was really that folk scene of we're talking early, mid 1960s, really. Late night. I remember going to concerts in the late 1950s because I know how I remember it because I remember McCall singing the Ballad of Jimmy Wilson. He sang in Alabama 1958, and I thought, Christ, that was only last year he's writing about, and because it was 1959, and it just struck me, and just a memory I've kept. So that was it, and then I was really visited other folk clubs. Balham Library was the music library for Wandsworth, and it wasn't too far from where I lived. And I used to go there a lot. And I think I got every book on folk music out that I could. Vaughan Williams, Sharp, collections, looking at stuff. And that was a really important education. Then after that, there was local folk clubs I lived in South London, in Earlsfield, and then in Battersea. And there was a Battersea Folk Club run by a quite interesting Irishman, quite a nice singer. And then I moved up to Islington, and there was stuff going. First at Islington, there were the Fox with Reg Hall and Bob Davenport. I used to go to that quite regularly. And then later on, there was Rod Stradling ran the King's Head Club. Lots of good traditional performers brought in for those clubs, and so I got quite a good grounding in that as well as everything else. So it was an exciting time, early to mid 60s in London.
Sure, yeah. And so was it just doing floor spots at the clubs and stuff was your first
Started doing a bit of that, particularly at the Battersea Folk Club. Yeah, I've always liked performing with other people. I've never particularly, I mean, I do it now because I've run out of people to perform with, but I've always
Oh, dear.
liked. Well, I'm getting old, and you have to build up to perform well with somebody. You've got to build up a rapport that can take years to do, and I'm running out of time to do that. But there are various people along the way. I mean, the first group I formed was a group called the Garrett Singers. And if you go onto my archive, the Internet Archive, you can hear some recordings of them. Although I can't we did a LP for Argo in 1970. And funny enough, old friend of mine, Terry Potter, I listened to it the other day because he wants a copy of it. And I've only got a very rough copy, except for the LP, which I can't play. I don't have a turntable now. And there isn't bad for its day, There's some quite nice music. We just got a group of young enthusiasts together, about 5 or 6 of us, and including John Challenger, a very nice singer, Richard Vick, and so that was the first.
That's right. I've heard it. I've listened to the bits that are on your audio archive. It was a nice version of Hares on the Mountain.
That's right, sung in harmony. So we were inspired a bit by the Watersons, by other stuff. It's of its age, but it's musically quite nice. Then I moved up to Islington, and I got picked up by, the worst band I have ever been in, Trevor Crozier's Broken Consort. Trevor Croce was a sort of scrumpy and Western performer. I mean, a nice guy in his way, except I heard he was, I've heard some other things about him since. But that was wonderful in some ways. I was in my mid-20s by then, and working with that group, which had a lot of work. We got loads of folk club bookings, three of us, and I was able to do my A levels because I left school at 16, having just got three O levels, and you know, at the age of about 25, I was able to play in the band, sort of, you know, playing three, four, sometimes 5 nights a week, and gave me an income to study. I did the economic history and English literature in 1 year and got into university and studied university in 1972. So that would have been 71, 72. So that was, you know, so music, I you know, earned a part of a living there. And then other things came along. Shirley Collins rang me up one day and said, would I like to join the Ettingham Steam Band because Terry didn't want to go professional. So I took a year out of university to do that.
Very
Then
good.
similar time we formed the Pump and Pluck band, which people you know were in, and
Yep.
then that when I moved away from Sussex, that's when I started playing with Will Duke. That's a long-term musical relationship.
course,
We can
yeah,
still play together, I think, beautifully because we just know what each other does and we play round each other, which is just, you know, it's wonderful when it happens. But he is a great musician.
He is, and in fact, Will Duke was in a duo with my dad for
Yeah,
quite a long
absolutely.
time as well, and yeah, they had a good thing going there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anyway, yeah, I was amazing.
And then, you know, when I went to Yorkshire, I met Annie Dearman and Steve Harrison, had a trio with them, which ran for a decade or so, which we
yeah,
did a lot. So I've
brilliant
always
stuff.
enjoyed playing with other people. I've really liked that interaction, and you know, when you're worrying about what other people are doing, you're not worrying about your own performance, you know, because you're trying to make the whole thing. It's very interesting. It's a sort of psychologically, I find it a lot easier than,
Absolutely.
you
And
know,
who can turn down a phone call from Shirley Collins as well? You know.
no, it happened one Saturday tea time. You know, just totally unexpected. I was in my second year of university, and she sort of phones me up and says, I mean, I'd known her. I knew her not well, but I knew her. She said, "Oh, you know, we've got this thing. We've got this band, and it's doing quite well. And would you like to join?" And sort of, I fixed it very nice. The university were very understanding. I said, "Look, I want to try this out. You know, is it going to be all right? Can I take a year off?" And they said, okay, as long as you promise to come back again, that's fine. So I did. And it
Blimey.
was great because it gave me that experience of being a professional musician. I decided I didn't want to be because I didn't like the traveling over much, but it was you know, there's nothing like the experience to help you make your mind up. If I'd never have had that experience, I'd have always wondered, oh, maybe I should have tried to be a professional musician, but full-time professional music. I mean, I think I am a professional musician, but not necessarily full-time.
Yeah, well, I'm here to tell you and tell everyone else it is a difficult and frustrating business being
It's a tough
full-time professional
life.
musician. You know.
It's a bloody tough life. I don't think there's any doubt about it. I mean, even playing local barn dances, which I did for 30 years, you know, you load the equipment up, you drive to the gig, you set it up, you
Oh
play the
yes.
barn dance, you take the equipment down, you drive home. You've done a day's work, you know, for which you get paid, you know.
Condensed into about 6 hours.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
well,
in the
you know,
evening
what's
on a Saturday night. You
on
know.
a Saturday night, exactly, you know. But
Yeah, I mean,
there we are.
I do a lot of that myself, and yeah, it takes it out of you if you do that. But sometimes, if you're able to get that kind of this is a tangent into the world of playing Kayleys for weddings and parties and things. But if you're able to do, you know, a Friday night and a Saturday night every week of that,
Oh, you can
that's a
make a
very,
living.
very good income.
Oh, it was what I mean, when I was
You know.
a research, particularly when I was a research student and we were playing a lot for dances. I mean, if the library didn't have a book, I never hesitated to buy it. You know, I was actually quite affluent because I had a grant and I had, you know, poor students these days have to pay enormous fees and
Oh
you
yes.
know, I really didn't know how well off I was when I was a student in the 70s, you know.
My problem is, as I'm sure my mother will tell people, is that I behave as if I've got an affluent lifestyle, but I certainly do not. But I sort of behave as if I am.
Mm.
Anyway, well, moving away from sort of confessional about my life. We better move on to the we better move on to the song.
Yeah.
So yeah, round 11, 11 already. It's quite astonishing. 11 out of 46,000 something or other now, isn't it? It's fine. It's about the journey, not the end.
That's right.
So the Baffled Knight is kind of the title we're using for this. So do you happen to sort of remember the sort of the very first time you ever came across this
I
song?
do. Well, I came across it in two ways, of course. The tune is in one of Vaughan Williams's folk song suites. Da 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 dee da da da. You know, that's
Right.
very. It was on the radio
Yeah.
a lot, and I knew it was called Blow Away the Morning Dew. And then in the late 50s, at Balham Library, I think, I came across James Reeves' anthology, The Idiom of the People. And that was the first time that the songs from the Sharp manuscript were published in unexpurgated form. And there were a lot of sort of, uncensored songs in there, and Blow Away the
Yeah.
Morning Dew was one of them. And then I found the song text there, knew the tune, and started actually having a go at it. And it was very interesting because I also had a copy of Sharp's 100 English folk songs. It's in there, but in a slightly expurgated form. Sharp cleaned up his songs slightly, well, not that badly expurgated, but it was, it was definitely not exactly what he had collected in the field. And I just thought it was really interesting. And that sort of set me on the whole thing about always go back to the sources, never trust editors. Editors change things, they interpret things. And so one of the lesson 0.1 of becoming a historian, really, always go back to the sources, interpret them yourself, see what the other bloke left out, and
Well, I was talking about that with Steve Roud about the way songs are titled. Is it the title you've found? Is that what the collector called it, or is that what the singer called it, or whether that's what the book publisher called it? There's a whole stream of unreliable narrators going on here.
Yeah, and that's really, and that's why the Roud number thing is so important. I mean, Steve has really managed to clear up a lot. Although, we still have arguments. Steve Gardam and son have arguments over which Roud number a thing ought to go in, and whether a song is a song of its own or whether it's related to another song. You would always have those arguments.
That's right. And so far on the podcast, that's only come up once, I think, with the Seeds of Love and Sprig of Time, as to whether there's always a debate about that, about whether they should be the same Roud number or not.
Yeah.
But
or whether you should have subdivisions, Roud,
Roud 3B and 3C, and
that's you're never going to settle that really, because songs in oral or semi-oral tradition are malleable things. They change, they alter, they influence each other. The nature of the thing is its malleability. Maybe I'll talk about that a bit more later. But
so was this a song that you heard a lot in the clubs and things?
Not much.
Clubs? Did this get sung much in like?
Not to my knowledge. I do remember singing it myself a bit. I remember singing it once in front of when Reg Hall was with me. I didn't know him that well at the time, but he really liked it. I sang it with the melodeon, and he thought that was great. So to be approved of by him, someone I'd looked up to. I mean, Reggie's 10 years or so older than me, and I'd seen him. I gave up the melodeon once because of Reg Hall. I just thought I never could be as good as him. And then when I moved to Sussex, I took it up again. But I just
to get praise from Reg Hall is
that was
a tricky
something.
business sometimes.
No, I can understand that, and but he was encouraging, and he obviously liked what I was doing, so that was good. Then I came across it a lot. Once I started being interested in songs and song research, you come across it quite a bit, because it has actually a very long publication history, which is fascinating. I mean, you talked with Steve Roud a bit about Ravenscroft. I mean, Ravenscroft, those three little books, and they're both rounds and catches. And
what were the names of the books again?
Their books are Deuteramelia, Melismata, and Pamelia.
That's right. I think Deuteromelia is the
Deuteromelius.
second one. That's
Yeah.
the second one, isn't it? Yeah.
And they're a mixture. They're rounds and catches. Now, a round is a thing like Three Blind Mice, and you sing, you'll start in different places, and it
That's right.
forms a harmony.
Hot Cross Buns, Three Blind Mice, all that
Yeah,
lot. Yeah.
that sort of thing. Frere Jacques. A catch is really quite interesting. It's a sort of rather bawdy form where the words catch up with each other and they create different meanings. I mean, Purcell and Hilton and people like this in the later 17th century loved catches, and they are extremely rude, some of them, some of the Purcell catches. But Ravenscroft was early in the day. And then there are what I call part songs, like this one, which is basically set for a number of voices. It's not a round or a catch, it's a part song. I think he calls them Freeman song. And it really is, this man was a jobbing musician. He sang in, I think it's St. Paul's. He wrote a treatise on music. He did a setting of the Psalms. He was a jobbing musician. He was trying to, a bit like you, any of your friends, anything you can make some money out of music. I mean,
exactly.
All musicians have always been jobbing musicians, because they'll do any music related work that they can get their hands on.
Someone should do a time machine. We'll go back and we'll do the Ravenscroft the Ravenscroft podcast.
Well, it's a lot of interesting stuff in it. I mean, there's a lot of fascinating songs, and to have the first known versions of a lot of songs we now well know, the Froggy with a Courting Go, for example. To have the first versions of some of those songs is really quite something. Some of them are obviously older. I think, and this is only my thinking, that Ravenscroft just heard songs around and got hold of them and made versions. We know the Froggy with the Courting Go, the Strange Wedding of the Frog and the Mouse, is older, and so he's a really interesting guy. He lays he's really one of the foundation stones of knowing about English vernacular song, and you really can't gainsay him. But then again, there's a very interesting publication history, because the song is then on broadsides in the 17th century in the Pepys collection, for example. It gets into Thomas Durfee's amazing collection, Pills to Purge Melancholy, which
yes,
its official date is sort of 17, 18, 19, round then. But actually it draws on a lot of older songbooks of the Restoration. I mean, Pills is over 1,000 songs. And it's got a lot of songs that we know, songs like Lay the Bent to the Bonny Broom is in Pills. A lot of As I Was Going to Aylesbury is in Pills. I mean, a lot of those songs we know as later folk songs are there with their music.
Yeah,
I mean, that's
Lay the Bent to the Bonny Broom. That's child number one, isn't it?
I think so. Yeah.
I'm gradually getting there with some memory.
I'm not one of these people who can quote child numbers.
No, not am I. But I happen to know. I happen to know that one is the riddle wisely expounded, isn't it?
Yes, indeed.
Right.
So
child number one.
So it's there. It's there in the. That's an important collection. Actually, for people, if they want to explore Pills, go onto the site of the library of the National Library of Scotland, the Glen collection, GLEN collection. All 6 volumes are there. All the songs are listed out, and you just plonk onto the particular song you want to look at, and the page comes up. It's wonderful.
It's amazing.
It's easier than reading the book. It really.
Well, I'll tell you what. We'll put the link for that in the show notes.
Okay, fine, no problem. And so Pills but it's full of. I mean, well, to say something about the nature of the song in a minute, but then David Hurd, Scottish collector, gets it. Dixon's Songs of the Peasantry, another really important foundation collection, 1846. It's in there. And then, of course, with the collectors of the turn of the century, Sharp gets loads of versions of it. Gavin Gregg gets versions up in Aberdeenshire. And the post-1945 collectors, recording, you've played some of those recordings. So, we know. So the song has a long history, and it has a long publication history, which I think is interesting. So I think one of the things that happens is these anthologies are important because they become sources for broadside printers. Like they go, it's in the old songs, 1720, old English ballads. So that's another foundation collection, and this song is there all the way through. So its publication history, a bit like Barbara Allen, is there all the way.
Wow, yeah, really must a very popular song then.
Yeah.
Or maybe it was forced into popularity by everyone publishing it.
I think for songs that live a long time in tradition, I think they have to be republished. I mean, I see it as a, I mean, I don't know, we could have a very interesting discussion with Steve Roud about that. I see it as a process of reintroduction going on all the time through the broadsides, through other song publications, little songbooks, the Garlands of the 18th century. And these printers were looking for copy. And what did they do? They raided the old stuff they had. Oh, yeah, we do. I mean, the wonderful thing about Barbara Allen, as someone says to Henry Mayhew in the 1840s, you know, Barbara Allen is still selling yet. You know, this song has been on the go 300 years, and he's still able to make a few pence from selling copies of it. So I think that's important. I think that's one of the ways songs have a long life.
So the version that you sing then, for which you have provided a version for the podcast to hear later on, where does that version stem from? Where did you grab that from?
Well, I think two sources. I certainly found the tune somewhere, and I must say, to my shame, I mean, in the early days, before I was a proper scholar, I wasn't too careful about recording where our songs, and I've looked for that tune to see where I got it from, and I do not know. I know it was around the 70s sometime. I thought it was from the one of the Sussex collector's manuscripts. So I've been through looking through all those, and if it's that I can't seem to find it. It's very much like the standard tune, except it's minor. Well, in fact, Dorian mode. It's not quite the same as the sort of Vaughan Williams sharp type tune. It's in a minor key. And I've always been attracted to it as a tune. But I honestly don't know and where I found it, and I've had a look and I can't seem to find it now. Usually I can go back and find this stuff, but I'm sorry about that. I now take a lot more care in recording where I get stuff from, because I know that some people have been rather slapdash about this. The words, again, I don't know. I knew that set from the Reeves book. But I do a thing, some people say this is terrible, some say it's fine. I do a thing called oral collation or mental collation. I hear versions of songs and then I put together a version in my own head, often not resulting to not actually writing the thing down until later. But so I can hear two or three versions of a song and put them together in my own head. And sing it that way. And I think that's what I've done with this song.
Okay. It's not the Martin Carthy method of writing all the verses down of every version ever on separate pieces of paper and jumbling them up and slotting them around until
too much trouble.
Until you come out with a 10-minute version of the famous Flower of Serving.
No, I don't do that. I don't do that. Oh, that does get jumbled, that particular song. There's really jumbled versions of it.
Well, that's Roud 199, I think, or 149.
We'll get there soon then.
Well, in about 7 or 8 years.
Okay. No, it's much more that if a line from the way, I don't know, John Bowden or Andy Turner, if a line from the way they sang it strikes me and it gets into my head, I'll sing that, you see. And I really think that's what singers did. I think the malleability of the idiom is like that. They might hear two or three versions and put it together in their own head. I'm like that about tunes as well. I mean, we talked about Will Duke, and when we were playing together a lot in the 70s, we'd found all this wonderful, interesting manuscript material, tune books from Sussex in this case, and I can read music and Will doesn't read music. So I used to record them, playing them onto cassette in those days. Will would learn them orally, learn them by ear, and he would then teach them back to me orally. So, and then we turn up with someone and play, and they say, "It's not like that in your book." And I said, "No, I don't expect it is." But if you believe the idiom is a malleable idiom, if you believe the nature of the thing is that it's I heard a nice thing. It was one of the people in the ballad session at Whitby talked about it being like a big Lego kit.
Okay,
You
yeah,
know,
yeah.
and that's quite nice. That was
You can make of it what you want, I
you
suppose, in
know,
a way. Yeah,
I do think there is that flexibility in it. You know, there isn't
yeah.
a definitive version of anything. And that's why I think, you know, I'm not like one of these people who condemns the revival. I think the revival is an interesting thing, but it's its own thing. It's its own thing that takes its
Hmm.
old material and then reworks it in certain ways. So I think so I don't, you know, I don't know beyond that. So it's something, other songs I do have a clearer view on where I got them from, but this one I can't say more than that.
Okay, fine. Yes, I like your version. There's something the line in it isn't there about something about young men should be minding their business at home, which made me
Yes,
laugh. It
yes,
made me
yeah.
laugh.
Yeah, so you
That
can
was
go
really
back and
good.
have a look in, see if see if I've got that from the Sharp manuscript version in the book by James Reeves. It
Well,
may well be there.
and I've got my copy of The Idiom of the People by James Reeves right here. And there it is on page 77, Blow Away the Morning Dew. And you've obviously changed at least the first line straight away. Because what have you got? It was of a farmer's
Farmer's
son.
son kept sheep all on a hill.
And here, what it is in here is, 'twas of a brisk young farmer kept sheep all on a hill, and he went out of a May morning to see what
What
he
he
could
could
kill.
kill.
And it's I, the dewy morning, blow the wind, I ho, blow the wind of a dew morning, how sweet the winds do blow.
So I've changed some of that as well. I mean, this is hearing other versions,
Yes, of course,
you know,
it's
that have invaded my mind, and I think that's absolutely fine. I would,
what have we got here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This is exciting, isn't it? 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 verses.
yeah,
Yeah, but it's got the bit I like. It's better for young farmers to be minding their business at home than it is to be out of a May morning to see young ladies swim.
yeah. No,
That's
that's all
great.
right. That's fine.
And
But
what's the last verse in your version? Where does it end?
uh,
If you
there
can,
is there is a flower in mother's garden called Merry Girl,
yep,
and if
that's
you
right.
will not when you can, you shall not when you will.
Yeah, my mother got a flower in her garden called marigold. If you will not when you may, you shall not when you will. That's
Now,
what
I've
it says.
obviously brought that Merry Girl in from another version that I've heard sung because I've
Okay,
heard that sung. You see, so
right.
this is interesting. This is the way in which the text evolves.
Okay, so the text in this book is compiled from is a it says here at the bottom a composite text using all the
Right,
elements from the above three parallel versions,
right.
none of which is substantially better than the others. And that's a version from Mrs. Price at Compton Martin in 1904, Mr. James Beale at Wareham in Kent in 1908, and Captain Lewis in Minehead in
Oh
1909.
yes,
So
statue
that's
of him, isn't there?
yeah, so that's a
Mm,
so those 13 verses are a composite
yeah.
of elements from those three
So we
versions.
come back to editing again now. Whoa, like
Indeed.
today, I can go on the internet to the Vaughan Williams Library and look at the originals in the Sharp manuscript. That's the best I could do in 1959 or so when that book came out.
Of course, yeah.
And but it still was, I mean, it was a revelation, the book, because you know a lot of the songs dealt with sex in a way that wasn't sort of, the 50s was a bit uptight and a bit sort of you know, buttoned up. This was pre the sort of sexual revolution of the 1960s, and even to sing about sex was considered in its day to be it's quite a sort of, you know, pushing the boundaries act. Now, I actually think this song is quite objectionable in certain ways, and I don't actually have it in my repertory now. I mean, I sang it, I made a recording for you because I knew it,
Yeah.
but it's quite interesting that there's been a change of since the 1960s, say, to today. There's a sort of change in sensibility, which also points back to the fact there's a change of sensibility going back to when this song was current, which is the 400 years since 1609. So, you know, I think we have to see this song in the context of a highly masculine dominated, quite repressive sort of society. You know, some of the writing I've done is I mean, I really took I studied history and I started reading about social history and historical demography, particularly. And it doesn't at all, when you do look at that material, which is not song material, it's contextual material, you find that those people who have this idea of the frolicking peasant, that things were sexually easy, it's such a pile of, am I allowed to swear on your podcast?
Well, no, but people have.
Well, it's such a pile of rubbish then.
Yeah, yeah.
That people didn't marry till they were late. The 26, 27 was marriage age. They, for the most part, didn't have the illegitimacy rates were very low. I mean, you're dealing with a society that is very conservative in terms of its sexuality and its, this idea that everybody was frolicking in the hay. Now, so what are we dealing with? We're dealing with perhaps wish fulfillment. We're dealing with desire. We're dealing with not the reality.
I was about to say, I did wonder whether, the songs and stories of the time was the way of expressing all that sort of thing rather than actually living it.
Well, that's an argument I would make, because obviously sex is interesting. We all have desires, we all have inclinations, and there's attraction to the. But actually, when you look at this song, it's pretty nasty. I mean, it's rape, or at least proposed rape. She extracts herself from the situation, but she's in a vulnerable situation. And the outcome for young women who were compromised in that way was pretty terrible. You would go into the workhouse, you wouldn't be supported by the parish, your marriageability would disappear overnight. You would be ruined in the phrase. If illegitimate children were not to be, they were not a joke. They were not something which was taken lightly by that society. So I do think that there's, I mean, we can put it in a comical sort of way, but I do think there's a sense in which people sang about it rather than did it, and that this song might be an example of that. Now, so in one way, it's a male song, but how is it a male song? It's a male song because it's ridiculing a man who does not fulfill his potential as a potent man who can go out and get a woman. Right? It's the man who's made fool of, and it's the woman.
Right.
So you can argue it's a sort of feminine song, a woman's song, in that she extracts herself by trickery from the situation. But I think that's going to be weighed in the balance with a notion that, she is highly vulnerable. She's naked in a brook, in a stream, having a bath, basically, having a wash, which you didn't probably get to do that often in back in the 17th century and the 18th century. And she extracts us. There's a lot of songs deal with that theme. When you think about it, there's songs like Lovely Joan and The Crafty Maid's Policy. The Crafty Maid's Policy says, there's something I crave which lies twixt your legs. And he thinks, I want a good thing here. And then
Yes.
she craves the horse and she jumps on his horse and rides away with it. He asks for it back and she said, no, piss off. So I think that's, so that's dealing with, what the song's dealing with is tensions in the society, male desire, female desire. But, the fact, you can really, one of the interesting things is one historian talks about signposts and warnings. And I think there's a sense in which some of the songs are, warnings of what can happen, and they're signposts as to the way you should behave. I mean, so a signpost in this case would be a woman in a compromising situation should attempt to extract herself, which she does quite effectively, by this stupid promise. He's gullible. He's promised, take me to my father's house. You can lay me down and you shall have my maidenhead and £1,500. I mean, ludicrous. But she takes him in, and when she gets to the house, he runs in. So, is that a sort of, at least in a jokey storytelling way, that's a signpost of how women ought to behave, perhaps, in that situation. So you can interpret, I mean, Steve's quite right, you can interpret the song in different ways, but I think you need to see it in the context of a society where attitudes to sex were pretty repressive, except maybe in the public bar or in male companies singing about it. So I think there's a whole lot of interesting things around the song. But I don't now when you think of all the violence towards female that's around in the present day, I don't find it a comfortable song to sing. I find that bit, if you do not when you can, you shall not when you. I don't find that. Why is he entitled to rape her if you know, when he can, and not when she can't? I mean, that seems to me a very strange thing to say, not something I'm comfortable with.
Indeed, we're going to come up against this quite a lot in folk songs over the course of this podcast's life.
Well,
You know,
they made it. This is an interesting point, and this is an interesting song about revivalism, because these songs were made in a different age with different conventions, different ideas, different mores. I mean, I'd be the last person to say they aren't interesting to explore, because I spent a blooming lifetime trying to understand them, learn
yeah,
about
yeah.
them, and so on. But sometimes you just feel, there's a song on the Garrett Singer's first the LP, the Argo LP, where he lays her down, he basically rapes her, and she says, "Now you're going to marry me," and he says, "No, you've had your share as well as me." That is an awful bloody thing to say
It's terrible.
to
Yeah.
a vulnerable young woman. And you look at it the other way. We were talking earlier about the cruel ship's carpenter. Where an abandoned woman there gets supernatural uh, retribution. She comes down and she destroys the perpetrator, the male bloke who thinks he's got away with it. So I think
Yeah.
there are all sorts of interesting questions. I don't understand why people sing songs like Hugh of Lincoln, where I think we mentioned this before. This is the blood libel, the anti-Jewish story of that Jews kill babies. That's been going since the Middle Ages, and
Well, we'll be coming to that
yeah.
one.
I mean,
That's
it's an
not too
interesting one,
far off in the Roud
right?
Index.
I
That'll
mean,
be in season 7 or 8, I think. So it's not a
right.
million miles away.
It's a very interesting song. I mean, and again, some songs I will look at and be interested in, but I wouldn't sing them today. I'd like to sing songs that, at least in
Yeah.
some ways, I mean, I don't think you have to believe everything in a song that you're singing, but some songs just make me to feel too uncomfortable.
Yeah. So it's interesting, isn't it? Yeah. There's this sometimes there's a view of folk song that it's all lovely and everything's pink and rosy, and then actually there's a lot of songs that just are quite awful
Yeah,
in their subject matter.
yeah.
And
I mean,
it just reminds me of the story of the Copper family, because the Copper family's repertoire does appear to be all like everything's lovely and running around in the hay, and but there's no sex really in Copper family songs or or anything else untoward. It's all everything farming life, and everything's lovely. And there's the story that one of them tells, it must be John Copper now, who's the eldest of the family, who was Bob Copper's son, that the idea that old Granny Copper, as she was known, it must have been Bob's mum, or might have been Bob's gran, I can't remember, was her sort of her generation of Copper family was the ones that were collected
Yeah.
originally by, you know the name,
Yes, Kate Lee.
Kate Lee, thank you, which essentially was a catalyst for starting the EFDSS as it became known. That old Granny Copper refused to let the Copper men sing any of the verses that had anything rude in them,
Yeah,
anything rude or anything bad. Which said, we don't want the city folk to think that we sing about smut and stuff. So essentially, the Copper family songs were self-edited.
yeah.
In a
I
way,
think
which
a lot of
which
that
is a
went on.
fascinating perspective on it. And
I think a lot of that went on, and it went on, for example, when there were women collectors and man singers. I think, there's
okay,
one singer says to Lucy Broadwood, I can't sing that to you. It'd be outweigh rude. You won't sing it to her because she's
well,
a gentle, middle class woman, and he's a bloke, and he feels that's not right to do that. And so I think I think there's always a degree of that going on. I think, everybody chooses songs for the situation they're in. I remember seeing old George Spicer, who was a wonderful singer.
I was right from Sussex, yeah.
From Sussex, yeah, and we used to have singing sessions up at Bob Fry's house, and we used to have the Saturday night in the pub at Ardingly. And George could work an audience. I mean, he could work an audience. I mean, it's not everybody that can get get a rowdy Saturday night pub in the palm of their hand, and yet George could do it. And I remember by the end of the evening, he would sing a song like "The Keyhole in the Door." I mean, do you know that song? It's
I've not thought
pretty.
about it in quite a long time, but yes, I kind
You
of do
don't
know about
necessarily.
it.
It's well known in the army and in the forces and in single-sex situations, And it's
Yeah.
about, well, you can look it up and see what
Oh, you
it's
can
about.
imagine with the
It's
word
a
keyhole.
pretty rude song. It's about peering
Yeah,
through the keyhole and then doing other things with the keyhole.
indeed,
Um,
yes.
and but that was by the end of the evening when everybody was at a height of sort of excitement and George was working the audience and so on. Fabulous to see. Again, it's not a song I would sing particularly.
No, it's probably best left unsung, some of those songs now. But yeah, with the Cup family, it just that's why I don't know if it's true or not, but I always thought I wonder if that's because of that self-censorship thing about we don't want them to think we sing anything rude. Why the song Dame Durden is only 3 verses long, because all because you get the thing about Tom kissed Dolly and Dick kissed Betty and Joe kissed Dolly and Jack kissed Kitty. For some reason, I'm able to
I don't
recite that.
think it's much longer in the older
Is
versions.
it
I'd
not?
have to go back and
Just
check.
in my mind, it
But
seems like it goes on. The story would go on a lot longer than that.
it's a very suggestive song, isn't it? And
Yeah,
Humphrey with his flail. I mean, the whole sexual symbolism of flail and so on. And Betty carrying the milking. It's full of sexual symbolism. But
yeah.
it's actually an old glee, that song. Quite interesting.
It's
And
Roud 1209.
I don't think
So
we're going to get there this year then.
well, if I do 3 seasons a year, I'll get there in 41 years. So and
I
I will
might
be and I
I
will
might
be
not be able to contribute then, Matt.
no and I will be 75, 76 years old
Yeah, and
then.
I wouldn't
Blimey.
like to think how old I might be, but I won't be.
Anyway, we've digressed a bit, but yeah,
Yeah.
it's the issue of sexual politics and gender politics in folk songs is a deep and depthy is not a word, but you know what I mean, business.
I remember. I'll just give an example of this.
All right.
It was with Sheila, and I won't name the singer because it's not fair. But he sang the Gus Elan song. It's a great big shame. Famous music.
That's
It's a
yeah.
great big shame, but if she belonged to me, I'd let her know who's who. It's about male violence. And Sheila really just thought it was amazing that anybody would want to sing that. And I think she's right. I think she's absolutely right. I
That's right,
wouldn't,
because I know that song because well, actually, Cosmotheca, the duo, did
yeah,
perform it, but I think that was more as an example of the kind of thing that people did laugh at back in the day, rather than here laugh at it now.
that's the interesting thing, you see. That's the one time, if I was giving a lecture about song, sex, and society, something I've written about, I might well perform the song, and say and point these critical points out. But in terms
Yeah,
of doing a
so
set
yeah,
at a folk club,
a
I wouldn't.
performance for entertainment's sake. It's a different business, and I
See, I'd
yes,
seen Peggy in the Squire. You see, Peggy goes, she sees Squire offers her 50 guineas to get a bed with. She says, "Well, can't turn that down." Goes to bed with him, then robs him, and then goes off on his horse. And she succumbs to the male lust,
yeah.
but she makes the better of the situation. She not only gets her 50 guineas, but rifles his pockets as well.
And
And
that links into songs like New York Girls, doesn't
yeah,
it?
absolutely,
All
yes.
that sort of thing. There's a whole area of songs about of that on that kind of subject matter as
Yeah,
well, which is
once you come down to Yarmouth Town and so on, yeah.
yeah, a discussion for another episode at some
Yeah,
point.
well, lots of interesting things to talk about.
Yeah, but it's yeah, it's all fascinating stuff. And this song in particular, I don't think I've yeah, you have to be quite sensitive, I think, with the choice of verses. If you were to perform this now for entertainment's sake, for you'd have to be you certainly have to try and tone down the rape sort of element and make it
Yeah.
more of a what was Steve Roud was talking about it a bit like the Two Magicians being a bit more of a game sort
Well,
of
that's
thing.
one way of thinking about it, but I don't think it's the most obvious way. I mean, the two musicians, it's about playing with metaphor. He turns into this, and she turns into that, and he turns into this, and
Yeah,
you know. But finally, he gets his way. I mean, he basically rapes her, You know, it is a
Indeed,
song.
yes.
You know, I don't think you
We
can.
can't get away from the end of
I,
the song, really, in which,
I
yes,
don't
it's
think you can because you know we live in an age where we still haven't coped with this. You know, how many women a week are murdered by a close partner? You know, I mean, look at this case in France where the guy hired his wife out. I mean, it's an awful
yeah,
bloody situation. So I don't think
I
we've,
know.
you know, so
It's
I,
nothing
I
new, which
don't
is
want
a
to
real.
celebrate
Oh,
this really. So I
oh,
do think,
absolutely.
you know, okay, I am selecting in the way the editors selected, but I'm selecting my repertoire, and I'm going to sing songs I can at least have some uh, connection to. I may not agree with them totally. It's not about that. It's about whether, you know, whether the song sort of works in a modern context, and I think that raises interesting questions.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, yeah, you have to. You have to treat it. Yeah, you have to treat it with modern eyes and just see how it works now, how an audience would react to that
Yeah,
now.
yeah.
There's a song I sing that I do in my duo with George Sansom, um, which is got from Martin Carthy, which is the epic revenge ballad, "The Death of Andrew,"
Oh yeah, that's
which
violent song, isn't it?
it's
It's a horror story.
it is, but it's got it certainly in because Martin got it. It's child number 46,
Yeah,
and he basically turned it into something in singable English himself, so that's what we got. But he does have the word "whore" in it, and in the end, George and I think it was George's suggestion, but I think we just removed the word "whore" just
yeah.
because it's a bit uncomfortable to sing that word. It's a long time ago. Not that it should have been acceptable to sing any time, but it was people got away with more a long time ago, and nowadays
Yeah,
I
it's
think
a
the word
difficult
"whore"
one.
just sort of it it's definitely that's not the right way to say it, but you know what I mean. In the
Yeah,
end
you
we
feel
felt it was
uncomfortable. Well,
just a bit uncomfortable saying the word really, so we just changed it.
sensibilities change. I mean,
Yeah.
they always have done, they always will do. On the other hand, I don't like, there's an interesting discussion on the radio today about censorship and whether, um, you know, whether you should use certain words. I mean, racial contexts and so on. I find it quite difficult because as someone interested in history, you go back to the sources, and there the word is, you know.
Mm.
So, on the other hand, you're only doing what thousands of people have done before you, and that's adapting the thing to a present situation, and that seems to be part of the process as well. So, I think you've got to go with your feelings and with your sensibilities.
Absolutely, it's a case of whether you are deliberately presenting this, not necessarily in an academic sort of setting, but whether
No,
you're presenting this as an accurate sort of record of what it was, or whether you are applying it to, in the case
mm,
of my sort of the thing, and you in a way that applying it to your version of a song that you want to
yeah,
perform to an audience
yeah,
is not
yeah.
the same as I'm I'm presenting this I'm presenting this song to a group of people who want to know what it was like back then, sort of thing.
Yeah, yeah.
It's a completely different sort of form
You see,
of presentation,
it's quite
rather.
interesting. Just going back to the point we made earlier, I could see that song in the 1950s as almost liberational because it dealt with sex, you know, and we
Right.
weren't talking about sex. Now I can see it as being rather distasteful because it's dealing with male violence. You know, I mean, so my sensibility has changed over a lifetime, and I think sensibilities are changing all the time. That's why we never fully understand the past. I mean, the past is sort of unknowable in a way, and we don't always exactly know how these songs were taken up and used and so on.
But yeah, my other thing I wanted to just sort of come to briefly because we, we're we're coming up to an hour almost on this.
Oh, we bloody
Um,
hell.
I'm very interested about the wordplay, just because you get with the crux of it, you get "I am a maid within and you're a fool without." That's
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
actual wordplay in
yeah.
a
It
folk
is.
song.
It is.
Does that happen much? Wordplay like that,
Sometimes,
it's not as common as I don't
not that
know.
common.
It's not whether you expect it ought to be or not, but it's just yeah, you don't come across genuine wordplay in old songs very much. And it sort of
No,
interested me a
it's
bit.
quite interesting. I'd have to think about that and where else you do find it, but it's certainly interesting. Yeah, that within and without is quite interesting,
Because
isn't it?
that's a linguistical joke rather than anything else.
Yeah, yeah.
So I
The
just, yeah, you don't get that much.
that use of without, meaning outside, is certainly historical. I
Yeah.
mean, the Scots still use out with, you know, meaning
Okay.
outside something, and and the fact she's a maid within, I mean, does suggest, she's not succumbed to
Yeah.
the advances and so on. So I think it's quite interesting wordplay actually.
Yes. Well, I'm sure there could be, yeah, a larger discussion about that at some point. There's quite a lot of issues, good and bad issues with this song to delve into. But
I do like the
uh,
tune I sing it to. I must admit, I do think that is a good tune.
it's great. I must admit, I'm here to tell you, folks. You'll hear it in about 5 minutes or so.
As I say,
yeah,
I'm
it's a
sorry
very
I
good.
can't find where I found it from, but it's definitely a genuine tune. It's not one I've faked or anything.
I mean, as you say, it does kind of follow the same
Yeah,
melodic kind of
con
structure.
yeah, yeah,
Because even
but
with the rising second line, because
yeah,
that's because
but it does it in a minor
and
way rather
sheep
than a major.
upon the hill, that's your one, and then you
Yeah,
got the Emily Bishop. Was it a daddle down and sheep upon the hill? So that it all
yeah,
and
yeah.
all these versions end up with a rising second line, and yeah,
I think all the tunes do seem to be related. If you did a Bronson thing and sort of
oh yeah,
writ them all out against each other, you'd see the basic structure, the basic shape of them was quite similar.
yeah. So who would you recommend in terms of
Well, I had a look at.
more modern singers, as in not traditional singers,
Well,
versions of this?
I think first of all there is a recording of the Ravenscroft version. It's on the internet. I found it. It's by the London Waits, which is Lucy Skeeping and her group. They were sort of quite big in the very done in an early music style with the sort of carrot up the bum style of singing. But quite interesting in that it's a realization of that Ravenscroft harmonization and so on. So it is worth a listen to.
Oh yeah,
I liked the Lucy Ward version on the Liberty to Choose, which is the CD made of selections from the New Penguin Book of English Folk Songs, which has that Emily Bishop version,
oh
and
yeah,
I
oh
think
yes, that was Lucy Ward, James Finlay, Bella Hardy, and Brian Peters of this
yeah,
parish.
but it's a nice band that they're really swinging. In
Yeah,
terms of a musical performance, I like it a lot. I mean, traditional singers. I think you probably mentioned Sam Larner. There's a film of him on the internet doing it.
oh
Emily
wow,
Bishop I hadn't heard before, but again, she's on the internet doing it, and it's a nice performance. I mean, she's a good singer.
yeah,
Although, as Steve pointed out, it's a rather incomplete version. McColl has a version that he learned from his father, and it's got the sort of slides in it, the rather mannered way of singing it. But again, it's one of those I heard early on. The Alfred Edgell recording, the one made by Sharp on a phonograph. He didn't do many, but that was one of them, and that's worth a listen just out of
yeah.
his interest. So I think there's interesting stuff to listen to.
Yeah, great. And then yeah, I've got some to recommend. Mentioning Emily Bishop, the band Faustus,
Ah,
with Saul Rose, Benji Kirkpatrick, and
yeah,
the late Paul Sartin.
Paul
They
Sartin,
did
yeah,
they did the Emily Rose version,
yeah,
and Emily Bishop, sorry, not Emily Rose.
yeah, yeah.
Who's Emily Rose? I don't know. Anyway,
You've made her up.
yeah, I'm sorry if apologies if I do know someone called Emily Rose, and I've totally anyway. They did the Emily Bishop version, and I think that's where I first really came across the song was
Uh-huh.
Faustus doing it on their album Broken Down Gentleman with
Right.
Benji
They were
Kirkpatrick singing
musically
that.
very good.
They were
I mean,
spot
Saul
on.
Rose lives near me here, and I saw him playing for Hexham Morris recently, and it was very tasty melodion playing. I
He's
mean, it's
great, isn't he?
very
Yes,
nice indeed. Yeah.
I danced with Hexham Morris for a year
Did you? Oh
when I
wow.
was under your leadership at university. In my second year of
Uh-huh.
university, I danced with Hexham Morris for a year. So
Wow.
anyway, there we go. Um, the Faustus one is the Emily Bishop version, which is very
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
Martin Carthy and Dave Swarbrick recorded, well, at least took the Alfred Edgell version as the basis of
Yeah,
their
yeah.
version, because I had listened to it before we started this, and the Alfred Edgell version is 2 verses. It's about a minute
Yeah,
long,
yeah.
and so Martin and Dave obviously extended it. And with those kind of wax cylinder recordings and phonograph recordings, you can never make much out except the melody, and sometimes not even that. But you really, I mean, you can really make out the melody on that one. And in actual fact, you can make out a lot of the words, which is
Yeah,
very,
yeah.
very pleasing.
They do vary a lot. I mean, I have got all the early cylinder recordings, because I was lucky enough to assess a thesis on the early cylinder recordings, which included all the cylinder recordings.
Ah,
And
very good.
so it's very interesting. They do vary. I mean, sometimes it sounds like the 1217 from Glasgow steaming through a station. Other times it's a lot clearer.
Yeah, but the Alfred Edgell one is surprisingly clear, and I do like
Yeah.
hearing that one.
I think I think it was a good medium, but the thing about the wax cylinders, they deteriorate when you played them. The more you played them, the more they deteriorated. They were not a permanent form, you know.
And Martin Carthy saying once that he went into the Vaughan Williams library, into the archives, and picked one up, and it shattered in his hand, and as soon as he touched it, you know.
And
but
they
yeah,
were as they were wax, they were liable to mold and stuff like that.
Yeah.
You know, they were.
But yeah, Martin and Dave's version is certainly based on the Alfred Edgell version, which is great. Lisa Knapp had a great version.
She's a nice voice.
Called "Dew Is on the Grass," which is on her an album she made in 2007 called "Wild and Undaunted," and her version is from. Was collected by Ray Vaughan Williams in 1907 from a Suffolk guy called Jake Willis. Oh, and it was printed. I'm using mainly Norfolk as my source here because hello Reinhardt. The Ray Vaughan Williams book, Folk Songs Collected. Oh no, Roy Palmer's book, Folk Songs Collected by Ray Vaughan Williams. It's in that one.
I have it on the table behind me.
There you go. So I recommend listening to Lisa Knapp's version. Eliza Carthy actually did it on an album on her album Rice from 1998 called "Blow the Winds," and that's a nice one. And a big shout out to Andy Turner, one of my favorite people, one of our favorite people. Andy Turner, I didn't mention him at all last season. Andy Turner did a project which actually was inspired by. Okay, we'll start this again. John Bowden did a project called A Folk Song a Day for a year, where he just uploaded a folk song a day and to sing out his repertoire and spark conversations about stuff. And off the back of that, Andy Turner started his A Folk Song a Week project, which was a blog that I think lasted significantly more than a year. I think it ended up being something like, I can tell you, it lasted 315 weeks.
Wow,
his folk song a week. And the Baffled Night he had on there, which was week 39, and he sang it called "Stroll Away the Morning Dew," because that was from the singing of a Mr. James Beale that Cecil Sharp collected in 1908.
Yeah, Sharp got a lot of versions of it. I mean, I had a look at the Sharp manuscript. He got a lot of versions of it.
It's great, absolutely brilliant.
So the song was around. I mean,
yeah, and won't be the last time. Hopefully, won't be the last time we'll hear mention of Andy Turner this season.
Andy's a very tidy musician. I mean, the tidy is the highest form of praise I have for any musician. Good singer, lovely concertina player.
He is. He's fantastic. I play in a Cayley band with him.
Right.
I play melodeon in Geckos with him and
right.
a few others, and it's always a pleasure.
Yeah.
And so I've sneak peek. I think Andy Turner is going to be the singer guest in a few weeks.
Good.
In fact, I'm pretty sure it's on the episode where we'll next see you as well.
Oh, right.
The Cruel Ship's Carpenter, I think it will be.
Interesting song.
Which I'm going to just double check that just in case, because otherwise I'm talking out my arse. That's right, Cruel Ship's Carpenter. I've asked him, but we haven't. At the time of recording, which is the 20th of September, I have yet to be in touch with him. But his episode won't go out for another month and a half, so we're plenty of time. Hello, good. Andy. So those versions are great, I think, and I'll put the links to all those in the show notes as well.
Wonderful.
Well, I think that's. I think we're done. I think that's.
Okay.
That's a fair wealth of stuff discussed, and could be discussed even further.
No end to it.
No, into it. It is terrible of me. I really wish that I was as interested in this kind of thing as I am now. I wish I was like this when I was on the folk music degree at Newcastle, but when you were teaching it. I mean, I was interested, and otherwise I wouldn't have been there. But I've never been able to apply myself academically, and I wish I was as interested in all this behind the scenes folk song stuff than I am in just singing them. But I am.
No point in regretting the past. Just get on with it now. You
No,
know?
exactly, yes. But yeah, not
We all have pasts to regret.
Indeed. Anyway, not to get too gooey, but I treasure the lectures we had where with you. They were some of the best stuff. Absolutely fantastic. Yes, and I remember I was there. I was in the last ever lecture you taught as when you were actually teaching rather than like a returning guest lecturer. Your very final lecture before you officially retired was one I was in.
Wow.
Where you handed out champagne and then performed the crockeryware for everyone. It was absolutely fantastic.
I still perform the crockeryware.
You don't hand champagne out to all your audience, do you?
No, I don't. But you see, the sex in crockeryware is consensual. He asks her, can I spend the night with you? And she says, all right. Upstairs they go, and she tricks him into breaking the potty and gets a load of money out of him. I think it's a very funny song, and I loved Chris Addison used to sing it. It was a singer in Sussex, lovely guy, and I sing it now with the melodeon that his wife Jean Addison used to play, and Peter Rogan has fettled up for me. So I really feel that connection with the Addisons when I perform it.
Lovely. Anyway, I have fond memories of you performing that for us at the end of your final lecture.
I didn't remember that. I didn't remember that. There we are.
I think that was in the Traditions of these Islands module that you were teaching us in my second year. So that would have been in the June of 2010, I think.
That's right. That's when I retired.
There we
I've
go.
been retired 14 years. That's unbelievable.
Yes, and I graduated from that degree 12 years ago. That's scary thoughts.
Scary thoughts.
Sorry, we're going off on a tangent about that stuff, but I remember
this stuff out.
I remember birthday presents from you when I was 9. I think it's long time ago. Anyway, I may keep that in. I may not. We'll see. Anyway, we've come to the end.
Good.
This has been absolutely fantastic.
Vic. Well, very enjoyable. Thank you
so much.
Fun.
We'll see you back on the historical side of 2 episodes further in this season. So
right, jolly good.
We'll see you then. But for the time being, thanks very much.
Good fun, Matt. Keep it going.
Cheers. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
It's of a farmer's son, kept sheep upon a hill, and he rode out of a May morning for to see what he could kill. And he's gazed at high, he's gazed at low, he's gazed and under look, and there he saw a pretty fair maid a-bathing in a brook and singing, blow ye winds of the morning, blow ye winds hi-ho, clear away the morning dew, how sweet the winds do blow. It's better for young maidens to be sewing their silken seams than out on a May morning a-swimming against a stream, and it's better for young farmers to be minding their business at home than out on a May morning a-watching young girls swim and singing, blow ye winds of the morning. Blow ye winds hi-ho, clear away the morning dew, how sweet the winds do blow. Oh, do not touch my mantle, pray leave my clothes alone. Help me out to the water and carry me to me home. And she's mounted on a milk-white steed, and he upon another. They rode along, like sister and like brother, singing, blow ye winds of the morning. Blow your winds, hi-ho, clear away the morning dew, how sweet the winds do blow. They rode along, till they came to some pooks of hay, saying, isn't this a pretty place for boys and girls to play? And she says, take me to me father's house, and you can lay me down, and you can have my maidenhead and £1,500, singing, blow ye winds of the morning. Blow ye winds, hi-ho, clear away the morning dew, how sweet the winds do blow. But when she's come to her father's house, so lively did she run, there was none so ready as a serving maid for to rise and let her in. And when she's come to her father's house, she's turned herself about, saying, I am a maid within, and you're a fool without, singing, blow ye winds of the morning. Blow ye winds, hi-ho, clear away the morning dew, how sweet the winds do blow. And there is a flower in mother's garden, call it merry girl, and if you will not when you can, you shall not when you will. And there is a cock in father's barton, never treads a hen, he runs and around and around and around, and I think you're just like him, and singing, blow ye winds of the morning. Blow ye winds, hi-ho, clear away the morning dew, how sweet the winds do blow.
That was Vic Gammon singing The Morning Dew. Which brings us to the end of this episode. What did you think? What are your thoughts on the song? I'd love to hear from you. If you'd like to get in touch with me, feel free to drop me an email at intheroud@singyonder.co.uk or visit the podcast on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. Just search for In the Roud, a folk song podcast. If you're enjoying the podcast, I'd very much appreciate it if you would give us a little rating and review on wherever you get your podcasts. That really helps the podcast to reach a wider audience. A little plug here for my own album of the songs from the first season of the podcast, which is still available to buy from our Bandcamp page. That's myself performing all 10, with the help on a couple of tracks from the excellent Emily Portman and George Sansom. Head over to intheroud.bandcamp.com to check that out, and the album is called Quinn the Roud 1-20. One last huge thanks to this week's guests, Steve Roud and Vic Gammon. Join me next week for episode 2. This is a very exciting one. We'll be looking at Roud 12, which is the child ballad The Elfin Knight. My historical guest will be Brian Peters, and my singer guest will be Martin Carthy. Until then, that's it from me. Stay safe, be well, and I'll see you next time in the Roud.